It's today is I've just come in from Ottawa. We've just spent this last 2 weeks dealing with this budget implementation bill at committee. I had an opportunity to speak a couple of times on it, but the whole issue of what's going on here in Parliament is really foremost right across the country, and no doubt I was so pleased to see the turnout that you had on Monday for your day of speak out on the budget bill. That was excellent. You joined 400 groups across the country. That's the kind of response that we're getting right across the country. I want to thank Joy Newton, who's my constituency assistant here in Yellowknife, and certainly George Lessard, who have put this together. This is live cast on rabble.ca, so it's going right across the country. That's the work that they're doing, making sure that we have good outreach, and that's really special. Never had that before in my time in this job, so bear with me. Why are we here? Well, we're here because over when the Conservatives introduced the budget in March, everyone was, I think, taken aback by the depth of the cuts. They were taken back by what Prime Minister Harper said over at Davos about the changing of the age of for the OAS, old age security, from 65 to 67. Did it in Davos. That was. Then we had the budget where we saw major cuts right across this country to all sorts of activities, and in fact we saw the cuts in the budget, but we didn't see how they played out on the ground because the Conservatives wouldn't even provide us with that information. So we've waited. We see now how things are playing out with Parks Canada across the country. We're seeing some of the things that are happening with Aboriginal Affairs and Northern Development branch across the north. We're seeing what's happening with our National Library programs. Unbelievable what they did there. We're seeing what's happened with a whole mess of things. That isn't finished. There will be more budget cuts. There will be programs that you've relied on for years to make a difference for Canadians. Those things will be filtering out of the system. The Conservatives have refused in Parliament to give us the information about how they're making the cuts. That's something that we've stood up, the opposition has stood up on points of privilege. We're still waiting for the Speaker to rule on some of that. But how can we have a budget without some details of what that means to Canadians? Simply giving large numbers for each department and saying, well, this is what we're cutting, without telling us what's going on. This is really, really undemocratic, unparliamentarian. It's really a very difficult situation. Then after that, and in April, at the end of April, we saw the budget implementation bill. And I want to show you that bill. That bill is this one right here. That's the infamous C-38. The summary of the budget bill is about 6 pages long. Under a normal bill of Parliament, when it's dropped on the desk, will have a summary that'll be about 3 paragraphs. This one, and generally within those 3 paragraphs, there's some description of what this means. There's some analysis of what this means. In this bill, there's 6 pages simply to outline what the cuts are, and very little details provided. That is the situation that we're faced with when this bill dropped on the table in Parliament in May. There are major things going on in this bill. This is why over and over again the opposition said, why don't you split this out? Why don't you give Canadians a chance and parliamentarians a chance to deal with these different issues in a good fashion. You're the government. You said you want to make these changes. What are you scared of? Why won't you deal with them in a way that allows people to come to Ottawa, to give testimony in front of committees, to do the work that is normally done by Parliament, to ensure that what you're doing, Canadians understand. They may not support, but they will first of all understand. And once we understand what you want to accomplish with all this that you're doing, then perhaps there will even be times when we'll want to create amendments. Right now, we've put forward many, many amendments. They've all been defeated. We will probably put forward up to 1,000 amendments going forward in the next week. Now, this is a protest. This is not what we want to do. No one wants to initiate a process with 1,000 amendments, each one of them that may have to be voted on by a standing vote. That's not what we want to do. That's not the purpose of Parliament, even if we don't agree with the government, that's not the purpose of what we're there for. The purpose is to create laws that, and make sure that those laws are as good as possible. Those laws will work for Canadians, even under the ideological direction that the Conservatives want to take. I don't agree with their ideological direction. I find it to be unbelievable, but you really have to, they don't tell you what it is. They won't give you that information. They won't say, well, this is why we want to do this, or why we want to do that. But it's pretty clear in everything that they've done so far that within this budget implementation bill, within the budget, what we see is that this is an attack on government, attack on public government. Information, right across the board. Dealing with information in government is one of the areas that is most likely to see cuts. Dumbing down government. That's what I see going on here at every level. Information, ideologically, is wealth, I think, to that group there. They don't want the public government, they don't want the public to have the information as Canadians have had for years and years and years. We've always had a system in Canada of public information, a good system. A system like Stats Canada, which is recognized right around the world as one of the best. Well, what did they do there? They cut 20% of the staff out of Stats Canada. The interlibrary loan program. How could anybody imagine that being cut in Canada? Cutting 20% of the librarians at the National Library in Canada. Then we talk about critical analysis. Governments survive, people survive when they can analyze what they're doing, when they have independent sources of analysis so that that can be portrayed to them in a fashion so that you know. I mean, no one's that omnipotent that they can simply do things without critical analysis. You know, whether you're a social democrat or a conservative or whoever you are, you need to have critical analysis. So what do we see in the budget implementation bill, in the budget? Hammering away at critical analysis of government. Making government so that it's more malleable, more easily controlled, more easily presented to others. You see it, the things that have happened today, I mean, cutting back the Auditor General, how does that help reduce costs in government? I mean, honestly, it's completely counterintuitive, but that's the program that they're on right now. So we've got this budget implementation bill. When we talk about environment, and I know a lot of you are here today because you're aghast at what's happened to the Fisheries Act, what's happened to the Canadian Environmental Assessment Act, what's going on in so many ways with the environment. Well, that's part of it as well. I want to hear your points of view on this. That alone should be simply, each one of those acts, the Fisheries Act, absolutely part of Canada fisheries. I mean, can you imagine Canada without fish? Without us taking care of our fish stocks? We've tried that. We've seen what happens when we don't take care of our fish stocks. We've seen what happens when we don't take care of the environment. The Conservatives stand up over and over again in Parliament and say, oh, this is about drainage, farm field drainage. And I go, no, it isn't. This is not about that. This is about essentially changing the way we deal with the environment in a profound way. And when it was funny, I had the Ducks Unlimited in my office actually yesterday in Ottawa, giving a presentation, and they said, look, we've lost 70% of our wetlands in Canada. I said, well, that's, why don't we see as many birds anymore? Well, 70% of the wetlands are gone. So is drainage an issue? Is installing culverts an issue in this country? Is draining farmers' fields an issue? Are those things part of the environment? Yes, they are. So now they're going to be taken out of that. So once again, we see that everything's related. The Fisheries Act worked for people in many ways to protect the environment. Those powers are going to be taken away under this act. When we talk about employment insurance, yes, we could change the system, but the system needs to be changed in a thoughtful, careful fashion, just as it's been developed very carefully over the years to provide support for people that do many different things in our society. And when we think of the North, when we think of the people in small communities who may have an opportunity to work for X number of months a year, they're not going to have much more of that. Do we say to them, take your best and leave the community? Do we say that that's the way to develop our communities, to support our communities? No, it isn't. So once again, we have a problem there. This bill takes so much away from Canadians. For what purpose? What is the purpose behind this? The Conservatives cut, since I've been there, the corporate tax rate every year. And amazingly enough, the corporate profits are so large in this country, even though they cut the corporate tax rate by 20%, the amount of money they're collecting for corporations actually remained the same or got larger. The phenomenal growth in corporate profit in this country is right there. You can see the numbers. That's what's going on. I know there's many issues you want to talk about here. I can go on for a while yet, but I really like it to open it up. I know people are going to be here over lunch, so I'd like to open it up to questions now. Perhaps at the end of that we'll have another. So if we could perhaps then open up for questions, ideas, directions, support. I know this morning my phone was ringing in the office, people calling me about land claims issues, about the fact that there are constitutionally protected land claims that guarantee people consultation on wildlife and issues surrounding the environment. That's just disappeared here. Just disappeared. So please open up the dialogue and we'll get going here. Thank you very much.
I'm here as the chair of the Aboriginal Peoples Committee for the Public Service Alliance of Canada. There's two things I wanted thought given to when you talk about environment and jurisdiction. I mean, a lot of what I listen to with Bill C-38 is so much like the Indian Act when it comes to how the government took jurisdiction, the federal government, over my mother's lives, my grandmother's life, and my life, and the environment we have. Bill C-38 is in the same spirit. as the Indian Act and how that was an international treaty. We're supposed to have jurisdictions of our own lands, and we still have it, with or without permission, because that's an international treaty. So I don't know when they do Bill C-38, legally what authority they have with any lands that are not settled yet in any traditional areas. So that's something I'd really like you to put some focus on, along with our Dene Nation leaders. The other thing is Bill C-38 talks to me about eroding democracy. So when we look at the type of government in Canada, I think there needs to be a lot more focus on what this really is about, is changing the type of government we have. I mean, if, as our member of parliament and sitting in the House, and if you don't get information, I mean, we were falsely led in elections, because it's not the type of government that we sought election for that we're having today, and I think that's real corrupt. I know in my community, with our own First Nation governments, we'd have a vote of non-confidence right now if we didn't get the information we needed to run our nations the way we need to. The other point that I would really like to bring attention to is Bill S-8, and it's probably hidden within there when you talk about water, because everything in Canada today is about global community and corporations. And I want an understanding of how Bill C-38 plays into the globalization of the world and global marketing, because something ties in there, because the support that the Conservatives are getting matches up with the global economy somehow. And I want to understand how that's interrelated, and who is really governing our country, and what's really motivating this Bill C-38. So masicho.
Well, I think you're absolutely on the right track there. I mean, this government is a corporate government. It wants to create a situation where our standards are competing with the standards of third world countries, of the lowest possible standard for the development of natural resources. Nobody's doing this for manufacturing reasons. This is not about manufacturing. This is not about education, it's about the resources that we have that others want, and that if we, by reducing the standards in our own country, we're going to attract more foreign investment, more people, more of the kind of investment that can take the money out of the country, that can serve the shareholders of international corporations. When you realize that 70% of the Alberta tar sands are owned by foreign corporations, you understand the basis of what's going on in this country. And now China wants to come in. Does China want to come in and have to follow the strict rules that we have? Well, only if our government insists on it. Only if, but for the sake of promotion of our resources, that's what this government is doing. The promotion of the sale of the resources by reducing the standards within the country. That's pretty clear. I mean, it's like Canada Post. You know, they wanted the whole battle over Canada Post that we had over, and you'll see that with every major labor dispute in this country. They're trying to settle things so that they can install lower priced labor in Canada, so that we can attract and deal better in the international global economy. And there is a better answer there. Absolutely. We can look at every social democratic country in the rest of the world, and we can see them doing a better job of this. So we know there are answers. And we know as well that we have 3.5 years to get another answer. I'll leave that one. When it comes to First Nations, every step of the way, I spoke about that in Parliament the other day. For First Nations, there's more and more pressure to keep them out of the decision-making about environmental assessment. It's almost, you know, you could just see every step of the way that that's one of the plans of this government. They know that First Nations can stand up to them based on Constitution, on the courts, and they're going to do everything they can to squeeze down on them. When it comes to environmental groups, what do they try to do? They try to create, as well as First Nations, they try to create an aura around them of radical yeah. You know, this whole thing that's going on there is, I don't think it's working. I think Canadians are a lot smarter than that, and that's why we're seeing many, many Canadians that used to support the Conservatives moving away from it. The Canadian Association of Retired People noticed in the last 3 months a radical change in support for the Conservatives among people over 65, because they're getting it. They get the message about 65 to 67. They've been through it. Somebody who's retired at 65 knows what it's going to means if you have to work a couple extra years. They know that. They don't need to. Us, if you're in the 40 or 50-year-old range, the comprehension is not as good as those people. So it's interesting how Canadians are all starting to really catch the drift here.
Thank you for your letters. As you know, a year ago, I was on working with and I waited for and then it was withdrawn. And for 7 long months, I've been having to fundraise $1,000 a month to pay for my medication. The good news is I'm going to make Canadian case law history. However, try to find a lawyer who will do a pro bono, especially in Yellowknife. In any case, it's just been unbelievable. 7 months of phone calls to Ottawa, and it's very clear to me how very much Mr. Harper has bound and gagged all civil bureaucrats. I've phoned Health Canada, who is initially blamed for my problem, and I have phoned them pretty much about every 2 weeks in hopes of getting one human being who would actually give me some information. And they can continue to refer me to their website. And they won't even talk to me, essentially. They won't give any basic information. They then refer me to the Canadian Health Research Department, and they also do the same thing. They refer me back to Health Canada. It's been a really interesting, long 7 months of research. Anyways, thank you for your letter, and it's been a long, long battle, and in the end, the good news is that I'm one of very few people who've had this kind of difficulty. There isn't a lot of case law on medical issues like this. That's kind of heartening, although it does make me feel really rotten about my own situation. I would have thought by now that there would have been a case fought for AIDS or cancer drugs. However, I'm one of very few. And the only case law out there in Canada to date is Viagra. So interestingly enough, if Viagra can be one, I think my drug of last option can be one. Thanks for listening.
You know, I just want to comment on your point about civil servants being muzzled. They're starting to fight back. They are starting to fight back, and I met a woman the other night who, a senior person in the health department, in the policy department, she voluntarily chose to, to resign from her position, and she wants to come and work for us. She says, I can't take this anymore. She can't take writing briefing notes that are not correct, that are not appropriate, that don't advise government in a good fashion, but simply provide the spin to whatever is going on. This is a very senior person in Health Canada, and that's the message that she gave to me. And I think that's, you know, we turned some of you smart, great civil servants out in the street there where you're going to fight for us too. We're all going to fight together on this, because that's what we have to do. We have to do that. You know, and it's my prediction last year, and I've spent more time in front of crowds in Ottawa than I ever spent in the last 6 years, and I know that what's happening there is going to happen on the streets right across Canada. What's happening in Montreal is just an expression of what's going to happen everywhere. We can say we don't like we don't like disorder, but disorder is a reflection of what's going on within our own government. There's a disorder there, and how do we deal with it? Because the Canadian sense of that is getting stronger and stronger.
What you just been saying has leads into my whole question, because we all have our own issues that we're concerned about. I mean, some people it's health, some people it's environment, some people it's issues running around the room here. Everybody would have at least one issue that they're concerned about, sure. And you get a general view of everything that's happening, which is great. My question, in terms of fighting back, is what are the most effective strategies we can use to actually make a difference, to actually influence this government, to influence, to be an influence in some of these issues?
Well, I think we have to influence society. You have to influence the people in society, in our whole society. I mean, that's really what is going to turn this. I mean, we have to continually stand up to what this government is doing to our society. We have to be vigilant, and we will be in Parliament, but we need that from people across the country. We need people speaking up.
So does that mean letters? Does that mean phoning people? Does that, I mean, what once we leave here today, what can we do to make a difference, I guess is my question.
Well, I would like to think that this is simply one step in a process that's going to continue for the next 3 years. This is just, you know, once those guys are not finished yet. This budget was the first budget that they had a chance to put their print on it. They didn't have a chance before. This budget, if it had come years ago, would have been thrown out by the opposition right away. They didn't have a chance to do this. There was no, and the budget in 2011 was an election budget, and in fact, the budgets for the last 3 or 4 years have been about the fact that our economy is in a terrible state, really. I mean, we still are running, we still are running an economy that's running scared for most people. You know, we've got increasing prices all over the country. We've got people with record debt levels, and at the same time, you know, the thing that keeps Canada's head above the water is faster and faster sell-off of resources. So, if you think of this country as our bank deposit, we've been just taking it out and spending it, taking it out and spending it. That's what's going on, and we have to keep strong for the next 3 years. We can't let, and when it comes in 3 years, the next election, and if those corporate guys are losing the battle of the hearts and minds of Canadians, it'll get a lot worse. This will get a lot worse, and on the other side of it, then the goodies might flow. So then, and this is how we ended up with a majority government at this time, with a very careful identification of particular elements of our society to target, to do what they have to do. We're going to have to fight hard next time too, because there's 30 more seats, and most of them are coming in areas so I don't want to make this into a partisan pretty difficult, though, but I don't want to make this into I want to stick with the budget. And you asked a question about how we proceed. Well, I think we have to proceed with this government by keeping the pressure on them at all times.
Thank you, Dennis. And first of all, I want to thank you for being the voice of Northerners here. I've had the great fortune of living in this great country for 13 years, and originally from the States. And I've watched what's happened south of our border. I've also been watching what's happening here in the north, quite concerned. My job has been eliminated as of July 10th due to the big cuts in the federal budget. I work for a nonprofit. We've provided services for persons with disabilities, worked with people in the correction system, and also those coming back from addictions issues. I've come to the conclusion that the Conservative government here in Canada does not care about the people of our country. And they darn sure disregard Aboriginal rights, Aboriginal beliefs, and everything that's strong about our Aboriginal people. My job has been as an employment support worker for persons with disabilities. And I can honestly say that the Conservative government has turned its back on people with disabilities. I feel that the Harper government does not give one damn about the North and Northern people. Granted, we're a small population, but we're a population of great people. And we've all worked together, and we all play together, and we live our lives together, sharing and caring. And it's not happening anymore. And I saw the writing on the wall when Prime Minister Harper was elected. You could see it. And I truly stand strong with you in your belief of the corporate influence on our government. Take, for instance, the tougher justice bill that they proposed forward. Their answer, build more prisons, incarcerate more people. Who are they putting into these institutions? People who have never really had a serious crime. They're going to start putting the mentally disabled back in. It wasn't that long ago that we deinstitutionalized mental illness and put them back into the communities where they could live and prosper and hopefully find happiness, and their families could find happiness. Not an institution, but inclusion. And I see that disappearing. So much money, federal money in the past, has been spent on various services, none of which were working together. Now, my request for Canadian citizenship is in the mill. And I'm proud to be here. And I'm proud to call myself a permanent resident. I'll be even more proud when I can say I'm a citizen. And I'll be more proud when I have that right to vote. And Mr. Bevington, you got my vote all the time in the future, because you've stood and you've been a voice for the people in the North. And personally, I want to thank you for that.
Well, thank you, and you said one thing that I really love, is that we all accept each other up here in the North. That's the most important thing we've got. Now, we got to keep working on it. We got to keep building that community, that unique community that we have in the Northwest Territories. That's what we have that is so precious, and that means very, very strong support for our First Nations to take the responsibility for their land and resources. And there's going to be many, many times in the next while where that's going to be challenged. And we just have to stand with our First Nations, and we have to stand together.
If I may, Dennis, I had one comment that I wanted to mention, was that the only thing the Conservative government
Roy.
Hi, Dennis. Well, as you know, I have a number of issues. Some of them actually predate Bill C-38, but I think Bill C-38 will exacerbate some of them. And one of the issues is the prevalence and existence of genetically modified organisms in a lot of our foods today. Canola being one of the most common ones. And a few years ago, under the Liberal government, as you will recall, a very brave scientist from Health Canada spoke out against the approval of the bovine growth hormone to be used in milk. And if it wasn't for that lone scientist, we would be drinking milk with Monsanto's bovine growth hormone in it. A few years ago, under the Conservative government, we approved the planting and sale of a new variety of corn, BT corn, which is an amalgamation of corn and a toxin that's produced by a bacteria which is designed to withstand the Monsanto's Roundup, and which allows the farmer then to plow the entire field full of Roundup without really caring about whether they're getting weeds or not, because the corn won't get killed by the Roundup, right? And the whole reason for it was to prevent the rootworm that is a plague to the corn from taking hold. Well, now what they've found is I'm trying to make my point short here, but now they found that the rootworm has developed a resistance to the BT corn, and now you got Dow Chemical who wants a approval for a new variety of corn that can now withstand Agent Orange, and now they want to be able to have the farmers plant this new variety of corn, and that the farmers will be spraying the corn with Agent Orange. And if you think that that's good for us, I think Bill C-38 is going to make it even more difficult to regulate that. And it's already not being regulated because the corporation has so much power, and the Agricom has, or sort of the industrial agricultural lobby has so much power because they funnel so much money into campaigns that once you become elected, you feel you have this duty to allow your donators a free hand. And I have a feeling that Bill C-38 is going to make this situation a lot worse.
Well, you know, there's many good farmers in this country that are completely against that. But you know, in Saskatchewan, we got 33% of the vote in the last election. We didn't get a single seat there. We do need people to get another voice in Parliament about this. You know, every single bill that we bring into Parliament that would fetter the ability of corporations to do what they want in our economy has been defeated. In the 6 years I've been there, every single time that's happened. And we had a bill one time was just to get an economic